From Carolla One Studios in Glendale, California, and brought to you by BetOnline, this is the Adam Carolla Show. Adam's guest today, Bill O'Reilly. With Gina Grad on news, Bald Brian on sound effects, and Jeff Cesario with the sports. And now, Patriot, not a pinhead, Adam Carolla.
Yeah, get it on. Got to get it on. No choice. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks for sharing with a friend. Hit that little share button on your phone. Good day, Gina Grad.
Good day to you.
Handball, Brian.
YOLO, man.
YOLO. All right, I'm going to ask you guys a philosophical question that I talked to Dr. Drew about the other day, and it brought me back to a place, a horrible, lonely, weird, sad place. And it did the same for Dr. Drew. And he was like starting to get the heebie-jeebies when I was talking about this thing, because I realized, you know, I've been watching the bejesus out of the Love Boat. And
have you?
Yes. And every single episode.
We should work into Dawson's intro.
So,
just so it's established.
Every single episode has the same story arc, which is the boy meets the girl, but then there's some confusion. It's always the thing where it's like, oh, she's high society and I'm a transmission mechanic. And if she found out I was a transmission mechanic, she wouldn't really love me. So then he says he's an international financier, right? And then she does like him. And then later on she finds out. And then she's not angry because he's a transmission mechanic. She's angry because he lied.
Right.
And,
the story as old as time.
Right.
As I say, Titanic was the biggest movie in the world.
Right.
But let's talk about, that's another kind of Love Boat.
That is every single A, B, and C story on Love Boat. And then at some point, the person, man or woman, goes out to the railing of the ship and leans over the railing of the ship at night. They're wearing their tuxedo or their evening gown, and they're standing out there just gazing off into the distance.
Contemplating,
melancholy, sad, trying to make sense of their life. And the average time they spend contemplating at that railing is 4.7 seconds before the person they were formerly in love with walks up to them and goes, hey, is there room on this railing for another passenger?
On a 2,000-person vessel, that person just happens to be there.
They look at him every time, and then they both say, I have something I need to say. And then they go, you go first. And then they both apologize simultaneously, and then they fall into each other's arms. Now, the railing will work for relationships, like love relationships. Also, if there's a situation where the young teenage daughter who wants her freedom has a blowout with her overbearing widower dad, you know, who doesn't want her dating the young boys, she'll go crying and she'll hang out at the railing for 4.7 seconds, and then the dad will come walking up and they'll have a heart-to-heart, they'll hug it out, and they'll go to commercial break. I realize that the motif, the blueprint for every single show I saw growing up, whether it was the Love Boat, you go out to the railing and then the person immediately understands they've done wrong, or they want to repair this relationship, or they were truly in love and it was foolish of them to react that way at dinner. They immediately just go out to this railing and meet the person, and they patch it up in 18 seconds. And again, they patch up every kind of relationship. If the captain is arguing with young Vicky, his daughter, he'll go to the railing and she'll walk up, or she'll go to the railing and he'll walk up moments later.
It's the come to Jesus railing.
Right. The healing power of the railing.
Yes. And it also worked that way in any family drama or sitcom where the person would go, Pa, I'm angry at you. And they'd go into their little house on the prairie. They'd go in their bedroom and just like slam the door. And then moments later, the dad would come in and sit on the edge of the bed. It was a universal answer for everything all the time. You got into a blowout, you're having a relationship, whatever that thing, you know, you wanted a mini bike really bad and their family said no, and then at some point you go in your room and you'd sit on top of your bed like Jan Brady and you'd like pout, and you'd pout for 4.7 seconds, and then Mr. Brady would come in and go, we've decided to get you that mini bike after all. It solved every problem. You just go to your place and you pout. And I realized, since that was the construct of almost every TV show and movie I saw growing up, you just have to go somewhere, look a direction off toward Mecca, and that person would walk into this space and then give you the news that you wanted. Either they loved you, or their mom and dad weren't getting a divorce, or you're going to get that mini bike after all, or you could sign up for Cub Scouts, or whatever it was. It was all solved. And so... Yes.
Is that where you learned your technique for getting back into popcorn or football after you just look out of your shoulder and you gave your parents the silent treatment for 2 weeks?
Yes. It took 2 weeks.
That's what you did.
And I physically wouldn't speak to them, which was different. Because I went in my room.
It took them a week and a half to notice.
I realized I had that burned into my psyche. So, like, when I was young, I'm going to go in my room and sit on my bed and be angry and pout. But no one ever came into my room. No one ever showed up. No one sat at the foot of the bed. We never patched anything up. No one ever even knocked on the door. It never happened. And I can remember, like, being in high school and being like 16 and really liking this girl, and we had a dust up and whatever, but I really liked her. And then I'm just going to go sit home and pout on Friday night. But the phone never rang and no one ever knocked on the door. And I remember having this thing where it's like, at some point, someone's going to knock on the door and go, I'm sorry, I made a mistake, I love you, or here's your mini bike, or whatever it was. And it just never happened. It never happened with my parents once. It never happened with any girl. Later on, when I was like 22, my girlfriend dumped me and I was distraught. And I'd be sitting at home in my apartment on Saturday night. Like, at some point, there's going to be a knock on the door. I even constructed a railing and put a scrim of the Pacific Ocean off into the distance.
A fan blowing.
So I could just lean against it looking forlorn in my apartment. No one ever walked up to that railing. And I'm trying to think, did everyone have that life? Were you guys expecting that? It was such a strong theme in every show I ever saw. But it never happened to me once. Every chick that dumped me fucking took it to the grave. When my dad said no mini bikes, he fucking meant no mini bikes. There was never any circling back. There was never any presentation of like, son, I want you to come out to the driveway. You see that mini bike with the bow on it? We changed our mind. It never happened. It never with anything. It was like, hey, can I do this? No. Okay, done. It would nothing ever came back. No one ever knocked on the door. No one came to the railing. No girlfriend ever called and said, I've really been thinking about this. Am I alone in this experience? Is this everyone's life? And what were they doing with this fucking railing? And why isn't there a class action lawsuit?
Gina, if I can jump in, I'll throw out a theory. I wonder, Adam, if this is like a young man thing where guys aren't, weren't brought up to really be in touch with their emotions. So I do that all the time where it's like, I don't get my way, quote unquote, which means the girl or whatever, or, whatever the trauma was in my 14-year-old life, I'd plot myself in my bed and just kind of, pout it out. And I wonder if that's just guys, young men, not being able to process what should be just kind of a fleeting emotion, like, oh, that sucks, moving on. But if to us, it's like hormones and everything, and we're just, all wrapped up in our own shit.
Well, I think for me, it was seeing so many depictions of it. I mean, it was just literally every episode had the person's. There was a rooftop deck version of this where they'd go up to the roof and they'd just be looking over the city, and at some point a hand would come onto their shoulder. Has anyone ever walked up behind you and apologized? No one's ever snuck up on me and apologized. My options are like, I can kick a hole in the drywall, or I can beat off and then kick a hole in the drywall. Those are my two options. There's not a third option where the person walks up, puts their hand on my shoulder and go, hey, Adam, I've been thinking.
I think this is very gender specific, because when you were saying all this, I was like, the amount of times there's been a knock at my bedroom door, or I've gone into another room and a boyfriend or a fiance or whoever has come in to say, let's talk this out. I think women do that and expect a follow-up, but I don't necessarily think men do it and get a follow-up.
I get no follow-up.
I think it's a very female, it's a very feminine scenario, because if I was,
That's what you're saying. I interrupted you. Sorry.
Well, no, it's just the same. If I was upset as a kid and I went into my room, then, eventually my mom would come in or my dad would come in, and we'd hash it out. But it's bad relationships. And trust me, there's a lot of things that make a bad relationship a bad relationship. But one of them was, a guy being maybe say verbally abusive or kind of just a dick. And then me being like, I got to extricate myself from this situation, going to another room. And there was no follow up. So then I'd have to go back and go, I'm sorry. I just need this bubble to pop. I need this to end. In good relationships and with women are used to being followed into another room, I think. Go ahead, Brian.
What Adam's talking about is impotent rage. And I think that's a hallmark of the teenager or the young man. You know what I mean? 14 to 25.
Yeah, it's funny. I never had it with any of my immediate family either. I always had this sort of thing that I could beg and beg and beg. If I begged long enough for a Honda XR75 trail bike, like eventually at some point I'd just wake up Christmas morning and it would be there. Like somehow this thing would manifest itself. And it was always like, your stepdad got you $10 and then your grandparents have $10. So if you can buy a $1,100 Honda XR75 for $20, then you may have. You could buy one knobby from one tire for that. But I was telling this to Dr. Drew, and Dr. Drew was starting to get uncomfortable because he was putting himself back in those days when he was sitting in his room, just longing for that phone to ring or the knock on the door, and it just never came.
You want to take action, or you want action to happen either on your behalf or something to happen, but nothing happens, and it makes your rage like kind of that much more condensed.
Yes.
And you don't even get the indirect knock on the door because, again, I'm just thinking of this from a girl's perspective. If I wanted a boy to call and he didn't call and I was so upset, I'd flop myself on the bed and cry. Well, my mom would come in and console me. You guys didn't have even an indirect consolation.
Your mom
Nobody stood with a boombox.
Your mom came to my room a couple times, but in general,
did she?
yeah, my mom. Her score is actually higher than my mom's. She'd actually flew in from KC, and
that's very sad.
Yeah. All right. Well, I was just thinking about, I just kept seeing everyone going to the railing and longing, and the person would immediately just slide. I mean, they were so close.
Manifest them.
They could have bump drafted them down the fucking Lido deck. Like, I mean, they literally could have turned around and seen them walking behind them. They were that far off.
Yeah, that was the other thought that I had. I forgot to articulate was, so like, I haven't watched that many sitcoms, especially ones from back in the day, but wasn't it an unwritten rule basically for decades that the sitcom had to either resolve itself or there had to be some redemption within those 22 minutes? You know what I mean? Whatever conflict there was,
of course,
it got wrapped up in those 22 minutes. And I wonder if that poisoned two generations of kids who would watch the sitcoms and be like, oh, well, this is unfortunate, this conflict I'm having right now, but it'll wrap itself up in 22 minutes.
Before the next commercial break.
Yeah, like you're trained. You were subliminally trained for things to resolve or have a redemption, and that's not how life works.
I was trained that if you just stared off into the horizon, that someone would walk up behind you and give you the answer that you wanted for something, or if you went in your room and slammed the door and sat on your bed and pouted, someone would knock on the door and give you that. I never got that on the railing of the Princess Cruise, and I never got it at home either. I don't think I get it now either. Maybe it doesn't exist. I don't think it exists.
Paying it forward, how many railing moments do you have with your daughter or your son?
Not many.
Room on that bed for one more, champ?
Never happened. All right. Well, that was my go to the railing and pout moment that has been, I rolled snake eyes on that bad boy. I had some thoughts. I was thinking, I was driving down Sunset Boulevard. I saw up on the Comedy Store, they had a George Floyd sort of memorial. And then the Laugh Factory had a big George Floyd picture. The Comedy Store has a RIP, and the Laugh Factory has a picture of him, and a rest in peace, and banners and stuff like that. And I started thinking... And then I started thinking about some of the signs I've seen in businesses like Black Lives Matters and stuff like that, spray painted on the boarded up, whatever. And I thought, all right, I'm assuming these people are a little less down with the movement, a little more trying not to get their liquor store broken into. I'm assuming, or somebody throw a Molotov cocktail through the. I don't want to be cynical, but I've seen too much of it to believe that I don't think they're all down with the cause.
And the two businesses you highlighted happen to be in very highly trafficked areas that you could certainly see a mob going down or protesters going down.
So it's funny because I thought about in 50 Years We'll All Be Chicks, and I thought about, wait a minute, I had a small chapter or a page on what to put in the window of your house, because I'm also seeing there's a sign that everyone puts in the window of their house, which has I think the decree is science is science, and maybe Black Lives Matter, and no one is illegal. There's a sign. They're doing lawn signs. They're doing windows.
In this house, we believe Black Lives Matter. Women's rights are human rights. No human is illegal. Science is real. Love is love. Kindness is everything.
Right.
Really drive the point home. All the different lines are in the rainbow colors.
Right. And so they're kind of saying, hey, man, don't if you're thinking about throwing a brick through a window, don't do our window. We're on your side. Mm-hmm. And I thought this is a sharp contrast to what I was preaching 10 years ago about getting a brick thrown through your window. But it was more getting your stuff stolen. But you have the audiobook there from In 50 Years We'll All Be Chicks.
As I've always said, the best form of home security is a Confederate flag. The stars and bars on the flagpole in front of the house lets everyone know that not only do you have guns, but you're probably cleaning them right now. So if you're a criminal casing the neighborhood, deciding which house will be your next home invasion target, which are you going to hit? The house with the Confederate flag, or the one with the hummingbird feeder and the cat count sticker for the firefighters? If this feels too racist for you, the next best thing is the "Don't Tread on Me" flag. It's the same connotation. This is the home of a proud NRA member who's ready, willing, and able to fill your ass with buckshot if you do so much as step on the lawn.
Yeah, so I was thinking, wow, this is quite a contrast from 11 years ago when I was preaching. So, and it's also kind of a fundamental thing, which is I was preaching show of force, and this is a completely different posture, which is, oh no, don't do anything to us. We're with you.
Yeah, allied.
Which is a new, and I would argue possibly dangerous chapter in this.
Can I split
order.
The difference?
Yes.
I've heard also, and this I would say maybe it leans a little bit, but in general, it's fairly down the middle. What you're supposed to do as an added security precaution at your house. Big, giant, go to like a Army surplus store or thrift store, get the biggest, giantest pair of work boots you can find and leave those out front on the stoop.
Oh, yeah, no, that's good.
Big dude who's not afraid to tussle. Yeah, a big guy who's not afraid to tussle lives here.
No, that's a good call. Do the Army surplus stuff, because the Army surplus stuff, the Army boot is the exclusive boot of either the veteran or the insane person. There is no in between. It's strictly veterans or bizarre, insane, crazy people who wear the military surplus Army boot. All right, we'll do the news in 1 second. Let me hit Skrewball Peanut Butter Whiskey over here. Perfect drink for your next virtual happy hour. Skrewball Peanut Butter Whiskey. It's not your average flavored liqueur, no. It's made by a husband and wife duo. It's an American whiskey with peanut butter flavor. These guys are up in the San Diego area, I do believe is the story. They got together. They're bartenders working in the San Diego area, and they made their own product, and it is great. We have it. I can't wait to our next Christmas party. Finally, we can all get together, pull the mask down, and do a shot of Skrewball Peanut Butter Whiskey. Also, they are donating hand sanitizer to hospitals, police, firefighters, and more. So it's a good cause. Good for a cocktail, good for a shot, good for a drop in a coffee. It's Skrewball Peanut Butter Whiskey. Right, Dawson?
Skrewball, the original most awarded peanut butter whiskey, is now available near you at 70 proof. Skrewball Peanut Butter Whiskey is the perfect shot or perfect addition to your favorite cocktail. Pick it up at your local store or get it delivered today. Ready to hashtag get screwed? Go to SkrewballWhiskey.com for more info. Enjoy responsibly. Advertisement by Skrewball Spirits, LLC, San Marcos, California. Whiskey with natural flavors and caramel color. 35% alcohol by volume.
All right.
Literally
should we do a little?
two of the greatest things on the planet, whiskey and peanut butter.
Yeah, I know.
The two best things.
Two
Now,
flavors.
yeah, once I saw my 15th birthday, yes. All right, Gina, should we do some news?
Let's do it.
News with Grad, news with Gina Grad, breaking viral, all those crazy Trump tweets. Give me news with Gina Grad, trouble in the Middle East, celebrity drunk meltdowns. Need news with Gina Grad.
The news with Gina Grad.
Well, I imagine this will be covered extensively on Reasonable Doubt, but since it's sort of new to us and breaking, we'll go ahead and mention it here. A grand jury indicted one of the three Louisville police officers who fired shots in the March 13th death of 26-year-old Breonna Taylor. Former Officer Brett Hankison, who was fired from the department in June, is charged with 3 counts of first-degree wanton endangerment for blindly firing 10 shots into Taylor's apartment. None of his bullets struck Taylor, but they pierced the walls and entered a neighboring apartment. Officers Jonathan Mattingly and Miles Cosgrove, who shot and struck Taylor, were not charged. A couple bits of information. The announcement of the lone indictment immediately sparked demonstrations in Louisville. There's a curfew, as we read this, a 9 p.m. curfew in the city.
Why did they charge the guy who didn't hit Breonna Taylor versus the ones who did hit Breonna Taylor?
Like I said, I'm sure you guys are going to cover this, and I wish I had all the information, but specifically Brett Hankison, his shots fired into a completely separate apartment. And so that's what they call wanton endangerment. So it wasn't even part of the situation he was in.
A separate unit through the wall?
No,
or he went into a separate unit?
Entered neighboring
oh my God.
Pierced the walls and entered neighboring apartments is what it says.
This is the guy who's firing blindly from outside.
Yeah, but he didn't go into another unit, or did he?
No, it said it pierced the walls.
Yeah. His bullet. People have no idea. An interior wall on an apartment building is 2x4s, which are 1.5 by 3.5 Douglas fir. I mean, it's a kind of a soft wood, right? It's the size of a thickness, basically the gauge of like a pack of cigarettes standing up. It's a little more than that, but I mean, it's not much. Drywall on an older unit would be 1/2-inch drywall and or possibly 5/8-inch drywall. Maybe insulation, some bats of insulation.
Yeah.
A bullet wouldn't even slow down going through 2 pieces of drywall. It's literally a nothing burger. It doesn't. It would have no effect on the bullet. Maybe it would change its trajectory marginally, but if you just fired through a piece of drywall, just go right through the drywall.
You're not going to get a piece of drywall with a bullet lodged in it.
If you were lucky,
A Derringer bullet.
Right.
Meanwhile, the studs, which could possibly slow down a bullet or even stop a bullet, perhaps, although not really if it was at decent caliber. Those are spread out 16 inches apart, 16 on center, 14.5 bay. So if you shot at a random wall, there'd be a very slight chance you would hit the side edge of a stud and be a much more likelihood that it would go through a bay. And the bay is 1/2-inch or 5/8 thick drywall, which is, gypsum. It's chalk, with paper over it. Maybe some R13 insulation bats, which is just fiberglass dog hair with paper on it. I mean, there's nothing inside that wall. That's when the guy gets pissed. When I would go stand out in the railing and my love would never approach me, I would go back into my apartment and you could punch right through. That's why guys punch holes in walls.
Right, because you can.
If you hit the stud, you break your hand.
Right.
If you hit a bay, you punch a hole in the wall.
Well, to answer your second question, and not a full answer, but as best as we can do right now, the other 2 officers, when you asked why weren't they charged, Officers Mattingly and Cosgrove claimed they were fired on first by Taylor's boyfriend, Kenneth Walker, and were returning fire. One of them, I think, got shot in the leg. There's another thing going down with the no-knock versus was it really a no-knock warrant? They weren't the same guys that asked for the warrant. So there's definitely nuance and confusion here, but that's the overall breaking news.
Well, this is just a perfect shitstorm. It's them going in. It's their no-knock warrant. I don't know. My feeling is like, let's let people walk out in the morning and cuff them as they're walking out of the building. I don't see what the media... Look, obviously there are things I don't know, and maybe they would tell you why. But my feeling is if you think something no good is going on in that apartment and you have a warrant, then surveil the apartment, and in the morning when the boyfriend gets up to go to work, you approach him and put some zip ties on him and ask him to sit on the curb while you walk into the apartment. That seems like the way to go. Then this is a perfect shitstorm. They go in with this warrant. It's dark, I'm guessing, and they get fired on. So how else? Now what's going to happen? Now they start firing, and the shit goes down. Lucky no one else in any of those separate apartment units were hit, all just laying in bed. Yeah. You know, all those drive-by shootings, all those drive-bys where like the 7-year-old or the 2-year-old is killed
in a crib.
They're killed in the crib. It's because the bullet just goes right through the stucco. Yeah. I mean, stucco's at least something, but it goes right through the stucco or the siding or whatever it is, right through the drywall and right into the crib. That's it's amazing that no one else in any of these units was killed.
Well, last week, Taylor's family settled a civil wrongful death lawsuit with Louisville officials for $12 million. I know you said that with Garagos that it's a incredibly high number for something like this. If you're doing this on a general day-to-day basis, it's not going to be $12 million.
No, I mean, Garagos throws out insanely low numbers, like just some Mexican guy who was on his lawn and the LAPD just shot him dead on his own lawn. It's like, that's $350,000. I mean, it ain't $500,000.
Well, because they're going for earning potential, right?
They do earning potential.
They
try to figure out like, how old the person is and how much they could earn. I don't know, Max Pat, did we ever pay out those 2 Mexican women who had, or like Filipino who had the pickup truck and like they had a paper route? God bless them. It was like 5 a.m. and the LAPD was looking for Officer Dordan or whatever his name was, and they just fired blindly. And they must have put 80 rounds into this pickup truck. Remember that story?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, and I don't think either one of them was killed or maybe even hit. I don't know how that's
quite an indictment.
Quite an indictment. I was gonna say, Jesus Christ, but also. I don't know if they must have got paid something. I think they got a 3-year-old Tacoma, number one. They replaced their pickup truck. All right. Anyway, sad, but
so you'll fill us in more, I'm assuming.
I will talk to Garagos about this, yes.
So the Ellen apology, I don't know if you're going to be super surprised to hear that the staffers thought it fell kind of flat. The big Ellen apology we talked about, and I have to say, I think I kind of
applauded her when they came off stage.
That's right. Only the ones that were directly in front of her. I feel like I nailed the exact part of this apology that rubbed people the wrong way. So I feel pretty good about that. Monday, as we know, she returned and finally addressed the allegations of the toxic workplace, but current and former employees are criticizing the apology, claiming her monologue poked fun at their suffering. So yes, I'm sure we'll have a little bit of a problem with the language. The word trauma will be used, but in general, I think we'll get it. So remember when she said, oh, how was everybody's summer? Oh, mine was great, terrific. And then she said, let me give you some advice out there. Anyone's thinking of changing their title or giving yourself a nickname, don't go with the be kind lady. Don't do it. That was the part that was highlighted. And that was the part that stuck with me, too, because it really did make it about her instead. And of course, the employees are saying she not only did she turn our trauma into a joke, but she somehow managed to make it about herself, which I think was pretty obvious. A current staffer claims that her apology was simply tactical. She's sharing it now because it's for premiere week and it's to get viewers back. And that just feels the opposite of what the message was supposed to be about.
Well,
more external than internal.
It's a really difficult thing to execute if you think about it. Christopher Dorner, by the way, was the officer, right? And the 2 women received $4.2 million. Not too shabby for delivering newspapers. One of them was shot twice. I guess the other one was not hit. 8 officers put 107 rounds into the back of the pickup truck. I know.
2 non-kill shots is all they got?
I know. I mean, it's like I can picture R. Lee Ermey talking about in Full Metal Jacket about the guy who was up on the on the bell tower.
Charles Whitman.
Right.
What is your major malfunction, numbnuts?
So here's the problem. There's a fundamental problem, which is everyone you work with knows the kind of person you are. You know what I mean? This isn't good days and bad days. This isn't...
Some days I'm happy. Some days I'm impatient.
Yes. Every single workplace, when someone is delivering you bad news or telling you they've screwed something up or giving you, or the worst is the miscommunication, where they're giving you a version of what you wanted that is not the version you clearly asked for in your email or discussion. And then you get a little, oh, come on, just fix it, hurry, and then you go, because when you do production, you're always on a clock, you know what I mean? So it kind of adds, when you add the clock, it's sort of like, adding the clock is like adding booze to an argument. It kind of supersizes it,
right.
Because when you're doing, like when we would be doing the Man Show, it's like we're doing 2 shows on Friday. We're taping 2 shows. We're taping 1 at 3 and 1 at 5. And all of a sudden, it's this countdown all the time. And now you're looking at the guy from the art department, and he's mocked up your goofball cereal box, but it looks like shit. And you're like, I told you not to go with that. I told you you wanted to look like Count Chocula. It doesn't look like Count. And the clock's ticking. If you had a week, you wouldn't have that feeling. But you have 2 hours, and it's sort of...
Right.
It sort of supersizes. It adds a little creatine to the situation. So production in general has a little ounce of hurry, urgency, which is basically the same effect a little booze gives to an argument. It just doesn't change the argument. It just kind of speeds it up a little, makes it a little bigger than it should be. But when Ellen creates an environment, and look. You can go do Leno's show, and you can go do Letterman's show, and you can feel the difference in the building. There's a different feeling of just it takes on the temperature and the flavor like a small business does. When a small business takes on the sort of personality of the 3 employees, or of the boss, the 3 employees sort of take on that. So Ellen is that person. But then Ellen had to do the problem is the person who's in charge with explaining what happened is the person who's being called a bitch. Really what you need is just somebody who works there to come out and explain what kind of person Ellen is. And then Ellen's going to do I'm human. I have good days. I have bad days. I apologize. Sometimes I get frustrated. Sometimes I get hurt. This is all just pablum. It's just sort of the same. You're essentially describing Mother Teresa and Gandhi at that point. Like Mother Teresa, she has good days and she has bad days. And sometimes she gets her feelings hurt. And sometimes she gets angry. And sometimes she gets frustrated. And maybe sometimes she says shit. That would work with the best human being you've ever met in your life. Right. That's not really addressing what everyone is saying. Mm-hmm. And you also kind of have to do it where I always go, if people are just cooking this up, then where are all the stories about people who've worked with Henry Winkler over his 50 years in this city? How come?
What a diva.
People won't say boo about that guy other than the greatest guy ever. There's nothing. You can't Phil Rosenthal or Jay Leno or Kimmel. No one will say anything. You want to know why? It doesn't exist. There's no, that environment doesn't exist.
Right. And I think now that you've seen it and we have a couple days or whatever, looking back, because maybe it was obvious at the beginning, maybe it wasn't, but doesn't it seem like that apology was 100% for the audience and 0% for the staff?
Yes,
because audience, please come back to me.
She doesn't care about her staff. She cares about her audience, obviously. Rightfully so. But
that's irreplaceable. Obviously.
Yes, that's how it works. It's still fine. Act however you want. And also, by the way, everyone, if your boss is a world-class bitch, feel free to get a job somewhere else. You can leave. You don't have to hang out with this person that is upsetting or upsets you or is tyrannical or mean or whatever, you don't have to. I don't recommend people run their businesses that way. But if you got someone you don't like, I mean, I had a few construction jobs. I remember when I was doing earthquake rehab, and I had a foreman named Jan, and Jan was my coworker for a long time. And then he moved on to another job, and he became the foreman. And then I went on to that job, and all of a sudden, my coworker was now my superior, and Jan was a douche. I don't know why Jan turned into a douche. There's a picture of me and Jan, Maxipata.
Okay.
There's a picture of me and Jan motorcycle riding in the desert, like smoking a cigar and like making a face at each other that I sort of recalls in the computer somewhere. Anyway, I went to the guy's wedding and everything, but somehow he became a douche when he became my foreman. And I was working earthquake rehab, which meant instead of $12 or $13 an hour as a carpenter, I was getting $19 an hour, which was a big deal for me in 1987. It was a big deal making $19. I mean, I thought I was rich making $19 an hour. And Jan was a douche, and he rode me, and he kind of rode me some more. And at a certain point, I went, fuck it. I'm out of here. Like, I don't care if I'm making more money than I've ever made in my life. Jan is being a douche to me, and I'm getting on with my life. I'm going back to $13 an hour. I just left.
And then you waited by the railing.
I stood by the railing.
Or the best, you open your car door and you just see a hand come to the door and shut it.
Push it
Adam.
shut. It was Jan's hand. I went to the parapet of the building on top of the roof where we're resheathing the roof and putting in parapet braces, and I just leaned over the top of the parapet and I just longingly looked out into the city, and at some point I felt a hand on my shoulder. That man was Jan. He explained to me that he'd done wrong.
Yeah, and that he's hard on you because he believes in you.
Yeah, all I remember from Jan is he was a Swedish guy, looked very Swedish, got along with him fine until he became the foreman and rode me out of town. But I did go to his wedding, and Jan was the kind of guy, construction guys are like, they're the kind of guys who, like, while you're down doing baseboard on one knee, they'll just walk upright and they'll palm the back of your head and fart into your head. You know what I mean? Like, these guys are insane. These construction guys are insane people. And Jan was this crazy, big Swedish guy who's always farting on people's heads and blowing cigar smoke into their face. And it was insane.
That's a hostile work environment.
Yeah, but that's how it went. Everyone did that to everyone. I didn't think anything of it. But I went to his wedding, and during the wedding, Big Jan was like stuffed into a tuxedo that he'd rented. We'd never seen it. You never see these guys wearing a suit or with their hair combed or ever looking serious at all. And there he was, with the candles lit, looking down at his miniature-sized bride and everything. And at some point, like the old man, who was like the old man from Benny Hill, he like came out. And he was the cantor, and he was starting to sing Sunrise, Sunset. It's like, sunrise, sunset. It's like 80-year-old guy.
Jewish wedding?
I guess. I guess his wife may have been Jewish.
Okay.
Sunrise, sunset, sunrise, sunset. And at some point, he did is this the little girl? Huh?
Oh, yeah.
And then when he turned to big fat Jan and went, is this the little boy? Huh? And I'm just picturing him farting on people's heads and chugging beers and shotgunning beers and stuff. I couldn't contain myself. I started laughing. We all started laughing because he was being sung to, like, is this the little boy?
Little boy at play.
Right. Yeah.
I don't remember growing older. When did they?
Right. And everybody got the giggles. And we couldn't. Miami Vice? Oh, Hammer. Sorry. Jan. Yeah, this is Jan Zetterberg or something like that.
Maybe he was Jewish.
It's in one of the books, I think. There's a picture of us like smoking cigars, camping. We'd go motorcycle riding and stuff like that. But Yeah, if your boss, I liked Jan, but he was being a douche to me for like 2 weeks, and eventually I just said, F it.
Enough.
Packed it in. Left the highest paying job I'd had for the next 9 years, probably. All right, Gina, one more. What do you got?
All right. Well, a great follow-up to a story that I really thought was going to go nowhere. A while back, remember we kind of tittered about Tom Cruise possibly going to space to shoot a movie, and we thought, okay, that's cute. That'll never happen. Well, Tom Cruise will be launched into space October 2021. The actor has just given a launch date to blast off to the International Space Station, where he'll film a movie. Tom and director Doug Liman will ride on a SpaceX Crew Dragon rocket and capsule to the space station next year to make an action-adventure flick.
Is this the sequel to Live, Die, Repeat, The Edge of Tomorrow?
TMZ says the film, which will become the first shot in outer space, is not a Mission Impossible flick, but that's all we know.
Same directing acting team behind Edge of Tomorrow.
Interesting.
Could be a sequel.
Underrated.
Love that movie.
Well, look, what did we say the other day? They were sending, what was it? Estee Lauder, or what was it? They're sending another product to space for an ad campaign. So it's, floating perfume. Now Tom's going. So this is going to become normal-ish.
I wonder if this is going to be one of those things that we will either experience in our lifetime or not. Like my family with Central Air. Like it will exist for 40 years, but they'll never experience it. Mm-hmm. Are we going to be that way with space travel? Are we going to space? Or is this thing, look, 10 years from now, it could be fairly ubiquitous and not ubiquitous, but obtainable.
Yes.
Obtainable. If somebody could afford a nice Hawaiian vacation or could afford the purchase of an RV or a second summer home, then maybe 10 or 15 years from now, this would be affordable for that group.
Right. And that's, don't people already have tickets purchased for something that isn't even built yet? Like there are tickets that have been sold for this, for going into space.
I think like one of the Backstreet Boys or one of those boy bands. Is there some story about one of the boy band guys having a ticket to one of these?
Lance Bass. That's how AJ McLean
Lance Bass?
His victory on the Stars.
I know somebody.
Lance Bass, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, Lance had a ticket to space.
How gay of you.
I know somebody who has one. If we ever want to talk to them, I know somebody with one of the tickets. He does very well, and his family does very well. And I remember when he posted on Facebook, and I reached out to him at the time saying, we might want to talk to you. So there is somebody we could talk to.
I would like to buy a ticket on the second shuttle going to outer space. The first one, I'd like them to kind of work the bugs out on.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? I wonder if it's got a railing and a viewing port where I can just go lean against the railing waiting for Lance Bass to come up to me.
Put your hand on the shoulder.
So, Max, Matt, I guess all those pictures in the computer, I don't know how they work. I think it was in my book.
Yeah, I'm searching through your book, too, and I'm not finding it.
Which book are you looking through?
I looked through the first 4.
Oh.
So,
that's where it would be. I think it would probably be in not Taco Bell material, maybe.
I'll hit up Lynch, too.
It's probably, don't we have a file of computer pictures? Oh, we're looking at Lance Bass.
Baby Lance?
Don't we have a file that just has computer pictures in it?
We do, but I know
there.
all the pictures on that computer, and that one doesn't even seem familiar to me, so I gotta... Yeah.
Oh, no.
What?
Now it could be in there.
Oh, because I'm saying that I don't know what you're talking about.
You put a pox on it by saying that.
Doesn't seem familiar to you.
It doesn't ring from. No,
I would scan through there. What picture are you looking for?
Well, I'm looking for you and Jan motoring along with your motorcycles.
No, we're not with our motor. No. This is we're smoking cigars and we're standing. We're not on motorcycles or anything.
Okay.
We were motorcycle riding, but it's a picture of us just standing there face to face with cigars hanging out of our mouths.
Okay, let me
try
to find
do that. See, this is the difficulty. All right, let me hit Simply Safe, and then we'll bring Cesario on, talk a little sports. Most home security companies trap you with high prices, tricky contracts, lousy customer support. There's only one that's a no-brainer. That is Simply Safe. Everything to protect your home, an arsenal, sensors, cameras for every room, window, and door, tailored specifically for your home. Professional monitoring day and night, ready to send police, fire, or medical professionals. Set up in under an hour, just peel and stick. No technician required. No contract. Pushy sales guys, hidden fees, or fine print. Starts at just $15 a month. U.S. News and World Report named it the best overall home security of 2020. The batteries last up to 10 years. No muss, no fuss. Simply Safe. Right, Dawson?
Head to simplysafe.com/Adam and get a free HD camera for our listeners. That's simplysafe.com/Adam to make sure they know our show sent you.
All right, we'll take a quick break. Max Pan's looking for that picture.
I'm looking, and I'm still standing by. I don't know what you're talking about. It's hard for me to...
Well, if you see a picture of me smoking a cigar when I was 22,
see that, I'll put that up.
I like that Dawson swapped out the cigar for a cigarette. I like cigarettes.
Maybe just like RGB.
Maybe.
I heard cigarettes instead of cigars. The Adam Carolla Show presents Bill O'Reilly's birthday cocktail party for September 10th. Let's see who's here. Golfing legend and a refreshing drink, Arnold Palmer. Toxic twin, Joe Perry. Colin Firth. Madonna's ex, Guy Ritchie. Ryan Felipe. American farmer and signer of the Declaration of Independence, Carter Braxton. John Lennon's first wife, Cynthia Lennon. From Three Dog Night, Danny Hutton. Let's say Feliz Navidad to Jose Feliciano. And German Shepherd, Rin Tin Tin. Happy belated birthday, Bill. Let's get back to the Adam Carolla Show.
Bill O'Reilly has joined us. The book, Killing Crazy Horse, The Merciless Indian Wars in America. It's available now on Amazon and has been part of a hugely successful killing series. Good to speak to you again, Bill.
Carolla, how you doing out there?
I'm doing well. I'm interested in this story, so let's talk about that. We can talk about politics. We can talk about life. We can talk about business. But let's start with the book. How do you pick your subjects for the Killing series?
Well, we started with Killing Lincoln, Killing Crazy Horse, the 9th killing book, the most successful nonfiction book series of all time. I mean, that's just staggering for me to think about that. And all of the books that I have written, I wanted to know more about the subject. That's how I choose the topics. So in Killing Crazy Horse, I'm a former high school history teacher. And there's a huge gap in my knowledge of American history from 1813 to 1890, 77 years of Indian wars. I knew nothing about it other than remembering John Wayne movies, Rin Tin Tin, who I share a birthday with, chasing some people around the prairie. I don't know anything. So my co-author, Martin Dugard, who lives in California, I said, look, let's find out what really happened, make these people come alive, you know, real people, Cochise, Geronimo, Crazy Horse, Sitting Bull, Tecumseh. Who were they? What did they do? And were the white people really that bad? Did we steal everything from them? So we found out, and we tell you the truth. And it's disturbing in many pages, but there's heroes and villains on both sides. And I think people, after reading this book, will be able to fend off the far left propaganda machine that wants you to think America's evil. And you'll be armed with facts. You'll learn a tremendous amount, and it's fun to read the book.
Well, let's start with the most basic stuff. I'm the same way, which is I know a lot about World War II, for instance, and World War I, and even Vietnam. I sort of know a lot about wars, but in battles and stuff, but I really don't know anything about the American West and the Indians. And because I think these people became sort of cartoons to me when I was a kid. It was cowboys and Indians, and they were depicted always in an over-the-top, sort of farcical, cartoonish good and bad sort of way. Like there was a cartoon version that was the evil, bloodthirsty savage. And then there was also the over-the-top sort of Billy Jack, proud Indian crying by the side of the road while the person was polluting the highway. And both of them were probably caricatures and almost cartoon versions of the American Indian. We had the worst depictions early, the bloodthirsty savages, and then later they became the most noble people in the world. But the truth, as usual, lies somewhere in between.
Look, in school, you cannot learn about the Native American wars because the public school system is frightened of the topic. The teachers and the principals are afraid they might be politically incorrect. They might say something wrong. They might use a wrong phrase. They might wear a Washington Redskins cap, and they'll be canceled. All right? So the solution to that problem is not teach anything about it. So you go from the Revolutionary War to the Civil War to Teddy Roosevelt. And then, well, what happened between the Revolutionary War and Teddy when millions of people move west to California? And here's something, Carolla. Here's something for you. You'll love this. So the Washington Redskins are gone because you don't want to talk about skin color. But the San Francisco 49ers, Carolla, they're okay. The 49ers. Well, who were they? They came in 1849 in Northern California, decimated the Native Americans who lived there, stole their land so they could pan for gold, discover gold. And San Francisco is glorifying the 49ers. I am outraged, Carolla. You have to cancel that name and change the name of the San Francisco football team to the San Francisco Pelosi's. And of course, you're going to need a new logo, and that's got to be a hairdryer right on the side of the helmet.
So tell us about, let's just start sort of large to small. First, we are moving west. And when we move, when the many people in this country start migrating west, that's when we start really encountering these wars and these situations and these chiefs. Is that when it begins?
No, a little bit before that. We begin with 1813 in the Creek Nation in northern Florida. They're fed up. All right, you got white people coming down. They're killing a game. They're invading their homeland. And the Creeks say enough. And the leader of the Creeks, a guy named William Weatherford. Here's how fascinating this whole book is. William Weatherford was educated in Philadelphia. He's half white, half Creek. He decides to lead his nation. So what do? They massacre 300 people, mostly whites, but some slaves, in Fort Mims, South Alabama. Kill everybody, all right? In a grisly way. We put you right inside the fort in killing Crazy Horse. Who are you going to call? Andrew Jackson. He's up in Tennessee, Nashville. Somebody just shot him. He's got a bullet. He can't get out of him. He's got now 2 bullets in his body. And President Madison says, you got to get down there and put these Creeks in their place because they're slaughtering people. Jackson does. He goes down to Alabama, a big battle of Horseshoe Bend, defeats the Creeks. That's where it started. All right. Jackson becomes a pivotal figure because he becomes president. And he knows the Indians because he fought them hand to hand. Jackson was sympathetic, in fact, adopted an Indian baby whose parents were killed in the fighting and raised the child as his own with his wife. And then Jackson is responsible for migrating all these Indians from the East Coast west of the Mississippi, the Trail of Tears, in a not nice way.
Right.
All right.
Right.
Now you got a whole bunch of Indian tribes west of the Mississippi. Congress passes a law that says if you're a white man, you cannot live west of the Mississippi. Nobody knows that. But Congress passed that law, okay? Of course, nobody obeyed the law because there's no law west of the Mississippi. Nobody's there.
Right.
So these millions of white people who came from Europe, they can't read or write. They have no skills. They migrate west just to get a farm so they can raise their families, all right, in freedom. And they run up against the Native Americans who have been on this land for hundreds of years going, what the deuce are you doing? This is our land. And then the fighting begins. All right. So Washington says, we have to protect these settlers. Now, the key to all of this is the fake news industry, Carolla. There was fake news in the 19th century. Just as you said very astutely, they didn't report why the Native Americans were angry or the abuse that they had suffered under Washington. They simply reported every massacre the Indians did. And they were savages and they were brutal and they didn't deserve to live. Well, that was how the whole view of the Native American tribes was formed on the East Coast, the people who could read. Mm-hmm. But the settlers, they didn't know what they were getting into. And so the wars began, 77 years continuously of war.
How much of the war, and it's maybe not a non-answerable question, but the settlers were white, they were European, they were uneducated. They had never probably seen Indians where they come from. Was there a racial component to this from the beginning, or was it just a dude who was there on land that I wanted, or was race injected into this at some point with the news stories on the East Coast?
It wasn't so much race, it was their godless heathens. And when the Pilgrims came over and settled in Massachusetts, the Indians saved their butts. The Indians of Massachusetts saved the Pilgrims because they would all die. But the Indians were friendly there, and they traded and they taught the Pilgrims how to grow stuff, how to survive the winters, all of that. In New York, when the Dutch sailed up the Hudson, all right, they ran into the Iroquois, not friendly. The Iroquois were very, very warlike tribe. So there were different tribes, and the difference was how they wanted to engage the white people. Some tribes wanted to kill them and torture them. Other tribes wanted to trade and be friends. So it didn't have a racial component. It was more of, are you aggressive or are you willing to live side by side?
So would it be fair to say that tribes sort of had personalities like breeds of dogs? Like some dogs are very aggressive and can hurt you. Others are more docile, good with kids. You know what I mean? So there were some like Labrador tribes and there were some sort of pit bull tribes, or they just had different personalities. I'm guessing that were infused in them over the years.
But here's the fascinating part about the Native American culture. The tribes were totally dependent on their leaders. And if the leader was a psychopath, then the tribe went that way. But if the leader was enlightened, like Chief Joseph in the Nez Perce up in the Pacific Northwest, then the tribes tended to be reasonable. So we teach you about Cochise, Geronimo, Crazy Horse, Sitting Bull, Joseph, Tecumseh, all the big names that Americans know blank about. They don't know anything about these people. Now, some of them were very noble, all right? But some of them were brutal. And the most brutal tribe were the Comanches in Texas, northern Mexico, and Oklahoma. You did not want to be captured by the Comanches, ever. They were not going to brook you. And they fought other Indian tribes. And that's what, again, it wasn't as unified. They were all different. No cities, no citadels, no central government. So when the whites came in from Europe and from the East Coast, they were used to structure. They were used to a town, and then you had a sheriff, and you had a judge. Indians didn't have anything like that. They were nomadic, all right? So that there was this clash of culture. And it wasn't so much race, all right? It was like, you're totally different than we are. We want your land. And the Indians go, you're not getting it. And that's why the wars began.
Slightly kind of off the wall question, but at some point, the Indians got hold of like Winchester rifles.
Right.
Where did they get those Winchester rifles?
Well, from their victories over the U.S. Army.
So they would then confiscate the rifles.
Yeah. Cochise was never defeated. Never. In Arizona. They could not beat him. Crazy Horse, never defeated until after the Little Bighorn, Custer's last stand. These were brilliant tacticians. And that's another thing that Americans don't know. These are really sophisticated makers of war. And they would attack envoys. They would attack forts. They would attack when the railroad got up, and that was really the beginning of the end of the Native American culture. Once the railroad went from St. Louis to San Francisco, they could get U.S. troops there fast with cannons and guns. But the Indians initially were able to raid, and Mexico was a big part of this. The Indians raided the Mexican army is petrified of the Indian nation and steal all their stuff. Guns, horses, ammo, women, alcohol, you name it. And that's where they became armed.
What kind of things would the Apaches do to you if they took you prisoner?
It wasn't so much the Apaches. It was the Comanches.
Oh, Comanches, excuse me.
Right. The Apaches were brutal if cornered. But the Apaches were more basically, leave us alone.
Yes.
Comanches were very aggressive. Very aggressive. So the Comanche, there's a Comanche moon, and it's coming up in October for all you people in California, if you can see it through the wildfires. Big, big harvest moon. And they call it the Comanche moon because the moon is so bright that everybody in the area of Texas, northern Mexico, Oklahoma knew the Comanches would raid at night because they could see. The horses, they could see where they were going. They called it the Comanche moon. If they got you, it was mostly torture by fire. And, we have to lay it out in Killing Crazy Horse. We have to tell you what they did. And it's really amazingly brutal. In fact, so bad that the U.S. Army taught their soldiers, if you run out of ammo, you leave one bullet in the chamber. And you know what that was for, Carolla?
It was for putting the gun in your mouth.
That's right. So every soldier, and most of the soldiers who went west were immigrants, all right, who signed up in the Army. Every soldier knew you don't get captured. You have to kill yourself.
Was it when they would torture you, it obviously wasn't to get information out of you. It wasn't really to benefit. It was to send a message, I suppose. I mean, was there any method behind the madness?
No. It was fun, sport. And the Indian women did the torturing.
Oh, really?
Torture was beneath the men. They'd turn it over to women, and the women would torture, and there was no reason to do it. They didn't send any message. The message was sent when they burned down the farms, and that was it. And they killed the soldiers. But this was just for fun.
And the women would be the ones who would carry it out.
Yeah, it's kind of like what it is now symbolically, but it was physically back. No, this is a jest.
Yes,
this is a joke for the Carolla viewers.
So it is funny. I don't think I've ever seen that depicted in a movie. Going along with all the things we get wrong over the years. So we have the settlers. They're heading west. They're running into the Indians. The Indians, they vary from tribe to tribe. But what is their general view of life? Do they have a religion? Is their religion more sort of nature, spirit-based? Are they schooling? I know they're nomadic, but what would be a sort of a general term you could say, like, here's how these people lived?
Basically a nature-based faith that there was a great spirit who created all of the things that the Native Americans needed to survive. They were very respectful of animals and the environment. If they killed a buffalo, they used every part of the buffalo, some for food, some for the tents, the buffalo horns. Every part of the animal was used, no abuse. They were appalled by the white man just gunning animals down, shooting them out of trains. And that was a big, big bone of contention between the Indians and the whites. They were not people who prayed They did have a shaman, which was attached to the various tribes who would, do the basic, okay, the higher power wants us to kill everybody in Fort Kearny, so here we go. But their lifestyle, most of the Native American tribes, and there were exceptions. I can go to Mesa Verde and Colorado and see. There were exceptions of tribes that did stay in one place and they farmed a little bit, but most of them would go south when it was cold, north when it was hot, follow the big buffalo herds where they went. And they were used to fending for themselves. They didn't rely on anything other than the tribe in which they were living. And it was a very fascinating culture. But they did war among themselves. There was a lot of that. It wasn't just the white man they were after.
How large were some of these tribes in terms of numbers?
Well, Crazy Horse had 5,000 warriors.
Wow.
When Custer showed up with about 800 men. Now, Custer was so arrogant, he had the suede jacket, the red cravat, the flowing blonde hair, the little hat on in a jaunty manner. He said, 800 crack U.S. troops can take a couple of thousand warriors. He didn't know there were 5,000. There weren't any drones then to give him intel.
Right.
And Custer, was very confident that he was going to go in and kick their butt. But anyway, there weren't, because of the food aspect, the tribes were kept in a manageable way. And you could be a part of the Sioux tribe. There were a lot of different Sioux. There were the Ogalla, that was Crazy Horse, but there were a lot of them. But they didn't all band together because it'd be too hard to feed everybody. So they were kind of scattered around. But for Crazy Horse, he managed to unite a lot of tribes to go get Custer. And that's led to his demise.
What was their language? Did they have a common language?
No. They all spoke different languages. In fact, the southern Indians, Apaches, Comanches, people down there, they spoke a lot of Spanish because they had to interact with the Mexican government and trade and all that. And some of them learned English, the smarter of them. But Indian dialects vary from area to area. And that was another reason they didn't unify. So they had their own language, they had their own culture, they had a point of view, and they wanted to stay fairly compact. So there was no big push. Tecumseh tried it. He tried to unite all of the Indian tribes to, fend off this migration that was coming over the Allegheny Mountains. And, William Henry Harrison defeated Tecumseh and killed him. And that was the end of him.
How much innovation or technology, for lack of a better term, was involved with them in terms of water, storing food, shelter and things of that nature? Like, was there innovation with some of the tribes?
Well, there was, and very interestingly, they use plants and they use everything, for various ailments. But life expectancy for Native Americans in the 19th century was, 50, 48. Some of the tribal elders, reached 70, 75, particularly when they assimilated with whites. But here's a fascinating part of Killing Crazy Horse, Carolla, and you'll find this interesting, I believe. Martin Dugard is my co-author and researcher. We didn't take what happened from the white point of view. In the Custer case, we couldn't because there were no white people surviving that battle. We took most of our information from the oral history that was passed down from the tribes from generation to generation. And then as the 19th century progressed, some of the tribe members learned how to write English and wrote it down. The Battle of the Little Bighorn, we tell exclusively from the Native American point of view. Again, because there was no white point of view. They're all dead. All right. And it's fascinating because the oral history is very, very precise. And they get down to, this is what Crazy Horse did, this is what Sitting Bull did, this is what the Braves did. And fascinating, I'll give you one nugget. Custer, with Custer and Crazy Horse, it was personal. It was macho, mano a mano, okay? He was the only body on the battlefield that wasn't mutilated.
Custer.
Custer.
Right.
Because Crazy Horse told his warriors, kill him, but don't touch him after that. Because the Indians had all the superstition, if you cut off this or cut off that, you can't go to the heaven or whatever.
Happy
Custer
hunting
was to
ground,
remain.
I think they call it.
Whatever it may be,
Yeah.
I would never use that phrase.
It's been in songs I heard from the 50s.
Yes, I know.
Well, so
that's how sophisticated it was.
So were all 800 of Custer's men killed and or mutilated?
No, because Custer divided his force into three. Big mistake. Custer led one, Reno led another, Benteen led another. When Custer got into trouble, Custer went into the Sioux village, rode in on horseback with his guys. Then they said, uh-oh, we got 300, they got 5,000, we better get the deuce out of here, which they tried to do. But Crazy Horse anticipated that and had surrounded them, and they couldn't escape. Benteen and Reno, all right, both colonels, knew what was happening and were too frightened, and so were all their guys, to go to Custer's relief, to reinforce him. And Reno and Benteen both got tried by the U.S. government for cowardice. But they knew, but they wouldn't go in because they knew what the outcome was going to be.
Right. So they surrounded Custer's 275 men or so, and they just slaughtered them that way.
Yeah, it took about 45 minutes. Custer's brother, his brother-in-law, his cousin, two newspaper reporters. I was hoping they were going to be from the New York Times, but they weren't, from a Dakota newspaper. That was another jest. And everybody dead in about 45 minutes.
How many Indians were killed in that? Do you know?
Nobody knows.
Nobody knows.
Because the oral history of the battle did not compute that. All right. So all the Indian casualties were removed from the battlefield. The Indians left all the whites there. All right. So they could count how many were dead. If you go to South Montana now, the Custer battlefield is there with markers on where everybody died. It's a U.S. national park. So, but the Indians took their dead and wounded, and there was no oral history of numbers.
Were most of the American soldiers back then Europeans or
Yes.
like young immigrants?
Absolutely.
I guess sort of in a way, a lot of military are in our modern day time are Hispanics and blacks and, folks, some new to this country, but it's usually a sort of lower middle class. You're going to take this job because you don't have an uncle that has a successful business. You can't go work with him. You have to join the military.
Right.
Essentially.
Right.
Same held back then.
Yeah, because the Civil War was a turning point. During the Civil War, all of the U.S. government troops were pulled back to fight the Confederacy. So the Indians ran wild out west. So if you were unlucky enough to be in Tucson, Arizona, you were protected by the U.S. Army fort nearby, but all of a sudden, they were gone. They got called back to fight the Confederates. And the Indians said, hey, this is good. We'll just go on and kill everybody, which they did. All right. So, but after the Civil War, a lot of the Union troops stayed in the Army. And they were hardened veterans. But many of them were from Ireland, Germany, those two countries in particular, would come to the U.S., didn't have an economic basis, no education, and the Army paid them. And they became professional soldiers. And then after the Civil War, they were moved out west. And they said, look, we got to provide a measure of protection for the people out there. And so here come the bluecoats. And then, as I said, the railroad made that much easier to do. You didn't have to ride out there. You could go on a railroad and get out there much faster with heavy artillery, cannon and guns and all of that. And that was the end of the Indians, the railroad.
Interesting. Was the primary weapon for the Indian before they got the Remingtons, sort of from the white man, essentially, was it arrow? Was it a battle axe or tomahawk? I mean, were they as skilled at shooting the arrows on horseback? Was it accurate? Was it an effective method for killing people?
The primary weapon for many, not all, but many Native American tribes was the lance.
Oh, the lance.
Like
Right.
medieval Europe.
Right.
Because with the big lance, and they had the tip, the steel tip, all right, or it was stone or whatever, they could do unbelievable things with it. They could throw it like a javelin. They could stab the earth if they were hunting.
Mm-hmm.
They could get a rabbit or whatever they were after, boom. And the lance, they could, when they fought other Indians without firearms, it was who's stronger on the horse, right?
Right.
Boom. Now, for other long-range battles, it was the bow and arrow, mainly with fire. So when they were sieging the forts, they would go, boom, throw the flaming arrow because all the forts were wood.
Right.
And they'd all go up. And then close in, off the horse, it was a tomahawk and the knife. And all the Indian victims were scalped. That was the mark of a brave warrior. How many scalps did you get?
Mm-hmm.
It was a tomahawk and the knife hand to hand.
I guess they had the ability to shape metal, or was everything sharpened stone?
As the culture progressed, the weapons got more sophisticated. So they didn't have, like forging and iron, and they didn't have it like that. But they could steal. And whatever the white man had, the Indians had. So, for example, you have train tracks, right?
Right.
So the tribes would just pull the train tracks up. And they would use the steel of the train tracks to put on the edge of the lance.
Right.
Or the arrow. In the beginning, it was stone, and then it got more sophisticated. The Indians were foragers. That's what they did. They went out and they would take anything that you had. So say they attack a house. Well, all the pots and pans in the house go into the Indian village for a variety of reasons. They were unbelievably creative in how they used everything, the Native Americans.
God, it's really interesting to hear these people sort of become people and not cartoon characters, as you speak about.
And that's why I wrote the book.
Yeah.
That's why I wrote it. Because Americans don't know anything about it.
No.
And that's a pretty big gap in knowledge. I am so tired, Carolla, and I know you are too. I am so tired of far-left people saying, oh, we're an evil country, we got to blow everything up, no more statues, our history is terrible, white supremacists. And it's so much more complicated than that in almost every regard. My job with these 9 killing books is to tell you the truth about what happened. Then you can make an educated opinion of your country.
Well, I agree. And, the way I always sort of look at it is being evil or being racist or wanting to randomly hurt people is sort of a luxury meets a waste of time. You know what I mean? When you're poor and you're hungry and you're desperate and you're nomadic, or you're trying to get from the eastern part of the country to the western part of the country, being racist or just being evil is kind of a waste of time. You really, your priorities are to get fed and to get shelter and to get whatever. And you can hurt people along the way who don't look like you, but that doesn't mean you're racist. It's a luxury.
There was a religious fervor that made white people, cruel, that because they're not Christians and they're, savages and not atheists, but they have no traditional religion, that we can do what we want with them. There was that. All right. But you're absolutely right. If you were just forging ahead, trying to survive out there, the Indian could be your best friend. I mean, Boone knew that. Davy Crockett knew that. Both of those guys are in Killing Crazy Horse. They knew. I mean, look, if you can make friends with some Native Americans, they can help you a lot, as the Pilgrims learned firsthand. But then you had this religious aspect to it that, was not a good thing.
Well, I want to talk about Daniel Boone and Davy Crockett and turn them into human beings instead of cartoon characters as well. Of course, we all grew up with Davy Crockett, and I think Fess Parker may have played Daniel Boone.
Parker. Absolutely.
It's a deep dive, and they made some Disney movies and TV shows. But again, everything was a sort of Hollywood sort of caricature.
Do you remember
cartoon.
The song, Carolla?
Davy Crockett.
Davy Crockett,
King of the wild frontier.
Yeah.
We should do
a Christmas Parker.
We should do a Christmas album together. All right, let me hit True
like the Chipmunks.
Let me hit True Nigel, and we'll break, and we'll talk about those two characters, because once again, I only know what the Walt Disney Corporation taught me about those two. First, I'll tell you about True Nigel. I've been taking True Nigel. It's a daily supplement for about 6 months now. I feel great. As a matter of fact, I took it this morning with some other supplements, and then I thought, wait a minute, did I take my True Nigel pill? So I just took another one just to play it safe. NAD is a vital cellular resource that supports daily function, eating, sleeping, and breathing as well. As we get older, NAD levels may decline by as much as 50% due to stressors like aging, alcohol, lack of exercise, sun exposure, and more. When NAD levels get low, the cells have a harder time producing energy they need to perform at their best. So there's only one NAD supplement I trust. It's True Nigel. They've done 11 clinical studies, Nobel Prize winning scientists, and global research and regulatory acceptance as well. So make age just a number. Visit True Nigel, TruNiagen.com. Use the code Adam at checkout and save $20 on any 3-month supply. All right, quick break. We come right back with Bill O'Reilly, and we get into Davy Crockett and Daniel Boone and those guys right after that. Bill O'Reilly is with us. Killing Crazy Horse is the name of the book. It is available on Amazon as we speak. I find this subject fascinating. I'm also happy to report that Bill is not just a spokesmodel, that he actually knows these subjects, because I literally was just all over the road quizzing him about all these things that I vaguely know, and he has a very astute answer for all of them. So thanks for not just being the name on the book, but actually being intimately familiar with the subject matter.
No.
We were talking about Davy Crockett, Daniel Boone. Talk about those two characters.
So I have in my possession, in my history collection, the deed when Daniel Boone sold his Kentucky home and acreage because he was fed up with too many people coming into the Bluegrass State and wanted to move to Missouri, where nobody was. So Daniel was this feisty guy, had been on the periphery of helping the new United States government move into Kentucky, had fought the British during the War of 1812, was a scout. That's right. But he didn't like folks. Daniel didn't like people. He's like a lot like you, Carolla. He had a little hat, but it was a coonskin hat. And he kind of was a scout, all right? But he had money because he rented his services out to business people who wanted to explore the Midwest. So he moves to Missouri, doesn't work out for him there, and he comes back. Not a real consequential guy in U.S. history other than the name and the legend. Davy Crockett's different. I have a letter from Davy Crockett. He was a congressman from Tennessee, only served one term because he couldn't stand Washington and sit in the office. Davy was an outdoors guy, a raucous guy, Indian fighter from the jump. Good shot, didn't really like conventionality, got married, abandoned his wife and kids, kind of floated all over the place. Did work for Andrew Jackson for a little while, but he found his way out to Texas because Davy was restless. He's a restless guy. He wanted action. He got, let me go out to Texas and see what's going on out there. Unfortunately, Davy wound up in the Alamo, and that was the end of Davy. Okay, but he was much more of a presence in history. I mean, he was an explorer. He was an Indian fighter. Then he fought the Mexican army at the Alamo, and a very flamboyant guy that left a much bigger trail, pardon the pun, than Daniel Boone.
I believe, and I'm going to ask my producer Chris, you can look it up. Didn't Zucker or Abrams of Airplane fame and Naked Gun and all that, wasn't one of them a big Daniel Boone memorabilia collector? I don't know, Bill, if you know that story, but the Zucker Abrams guys who obviously have done all those Naked Gun and Airplane movies and Police Squad and sort of beyond all those comedies. I think it's Zucker. Is it Zucker or Abrams? One of them has a large collection of Daniel Boone.
It's Davy Crockett.
Oh, Davy Crockett.
Davy Crockett fan.
Damn it. A huge Davy Crockett
very
fan.
Very valuable. There's not a lot of Davy Crockett stuff around. I have a letter written by then Congressman Crockett with a lot of misspellings, Carolla. I got to tell you, a lot of misspellings in the letter.
Well, frontier cursive. We'll give them a break. Right. They didn't have spell check on their quills. So,
that's for sure.
So I can't even get spell check on Twitter. I'm screwed. So were these guys, what would they have been? Would they have been your rowdy friends from high school that drank a little too much? Would they have been, sort of the quiet guy who kept to himself, who didn't want neighbors? Like, I'm trying to sort of think of who these guys would be today.
I don't know if they could survive because both Daniel Boone and Davy Crockett were people who didn't like civilization very much. They didn't want to settle down. They didn't want to conform. They didn't want to have a job or be a farmer. They wanted adventure. Mm-hmm. So maybe they'd be in the CIA or one of those things. But they were explorers, and they just want to get out there and see what was over the next mountain. That's who they were. They weren't gunfighters. They weren't looking. They weren't aggressively violent. They just wanted action. And Boone, it worked out okay for him, but Crockett was killed. He was 34 when he died.
At the Alamo.
Right.
And how did they befriend the Indians? How did they have these sort of relationships where they could travel through their territories?
Well, Boone was such a skilled woodsman that the Indians in Kentucky and Ohio respected him because he was like the first guy out there. And he was this eccentric guy who lived like the Indians, lived in the same kind of we hunt, we cook, we eat, we go to sleep, we get up, we hunt, do it again. They built a cabin, but the Indians and Daniel Boone had a lot in common. Crockett was more of a guy who was very charismatic. They loved him. He was a macho man. Andrew Jackson's friend, good shot, good with a knife. He was kind of the guy that walks in the bar and everybody wants to buy him a drink.
Right.
That was Davy. Boone was much more solitary.
It worries me, and I'm sure it worries you too as well, this sort of version of history that we're trying to teach all the kids these days, which I feel like is sort of poisoning them in the modern time through sort of taking these people and turning them into very negative cartoon characters. And there's so much to glean from the history, good and bad. Do you worry about what is being taught and how it's being taught in the school 1619 project and things of that nature, sort of Black Lives Matter manifesto and that sort of stuff?
Well, I do worry about it because parents are becoming increasingly derelict in their responsibility to make sure their children know about their country. So history, they can't teach about Native Americans, Carolla. You can't do that. And they don't, because you make one false statement or you wear a Washington Redskins cap, like I said, and you're canceled. So every history teacher knows, oh, no, we're not going to get into this Native American stuff. We're going to go right from the Revolutionary War to the Civil War to Teddy Roosevelt. And no in between, because I might say something wrong. And then a little Zeke is going to go home and Heather and go, oh, they said this about the Native American. And then all of a sudden the teacher's up on charges in front of the school board. You're a racist, you're everything. So it's not taught. And therefore, we get an army of younger Americans who know absolutely nothing about their country. You remember a segment I did on The Factor called Waters World, where I sent Jesse Waters out to ask people, even the basics, and nobody knew anything? Yeah. I mean, that's where we are in this country.
It was like a historical jaywalking, Jay Leno.
And Leno stole it from me. Just to be clear, because we did it way back. And people say, oh, no, you just took the dumb people. No, we did it random time. We didn't edit. This is who we talked to. This is what they said. We didn't select the dumb people. All right. And when you have a population that doesn't know anything, then they'll swallow propaganda on both sides, on both the left and the right. And that's my mission in these killing books. You read Killing Lincoln, Killing England, Killing Crazy Horse, you'll know how your country was formed. You read those through book, you'll know.
By the way, the broadcast show, No Spin News, weeknights, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 o'clock Pacific, on the First TV New Media Network. Yeah, so let's talk about that and Fox and such. I don't have a everything happens for a reason. I'm not that guy. I do believe that change is always good, even when it doesn't initially feel good. I lost a broadcast syndicated radio show job when I replaced Howard Stern, and CBS Radio cut me, 12 years ago. And I was disappointed and unhappy that I'd lost my job. Now, as I look back on it, probably the best thing that ever happened to me. How do you feel looking back on your relationship with Fox, and was it a blessing in disguise?
Well, I don't know about that, but I had been in corporate media for 42 years. I had been at Fox News Channel for more than 20. Very successful in all my venues. I work hard. I think I bring a unique view of life to whatever I do. But I had pretty much enough. And there was a big change in management in Fox. Roger Ailes left the company, and he was the originator of the concept. And I was left there by saying, all right, we're doing real well. We're the #1 rated cable news show. But I had to answer to a corporation. And then when the corporation didn't back me, I said, all right, well, I'll go do something else. And by that time, I was iconic. People knew who I was. I had tons of money in the bank, thank God, because money gives you options. And then I decided to form my own news agency, BillO'Reilly.com. Now, that has gone just this year alone from a $5 million company to a $25 million company in 9 months. Wow. Because of the pandemic and the racial stuff. Because people know I'll tell them the truth. You may not agree with me, but I'll back up what I say. And that's why the books. Do you know that Killing Crazy Horse in the first 2 weeks has sold more than 200,000 copies, Carolla?
That is
you're
a
in
lot.
This business.
Yes, that's a lot.
That's a lot. And Trump's not even in the book. I tried to get him in, but it's 150 years too early.
That's a lot of units.
Every book is I love Trump, I hate Trump. This book is just a history book, 200,000 copies. So I wouldn't say it was a blessing, because you always want to go out on your own terms. And but it took me 48 hours to say, I'm going to start my own news agency. And again, thank God, I believe in God, you don't, but who's more handsome, Carolla? That's what you have to say.
Well, I don't say a blessing. I say in life, when there's a change, sometimes it's a relationship. Sometimes it's a boss. Sometimes it's a company you work for. I said, usually when you get a year away from that time of divorce or that time of being fired or that time of going separate ways or having to move or whatever that change is, usually when you look back on it, you're sort of happy that it turned out that way because you would have never met this person or you never would have started this company. And that's the way I sort of look at it. Not that you're happy about it, just that it turned out to be a positive thing because now you're doing something that you wouldn't have been doing.
That is a very wise assessment that you just put forth to your viewers, but there's one other factor involved. Because I got out of the corporate world, I could spend more time with my kids. I'm coming to you from my studio. It's in my house.
Right.
All right. Just like you. So I spent a lot of time in the teen years with the urchins. And that was an enormous plus. So I always spent time with them. But now I could be a presence that had an impact. And I don't talk about that kind of stuff very much, but that was an unintended consequence of this whole thing. That is the biggest positive of all.
Do you have a relationship with Tucker Carlson? Do you watch the show? Do you have any interest in the past and or Tucker?
Once in a while, I'll tune in to watch, to see what everybody's doing. I don't know Tucker very well. I know him a little bit, but he was in Washington. I was in New York. In the first couple of years after he took over for me, he was doing all right. But then that show went into different areas where, like him or not, the guy is saying stuff that nobody else says. Mm-hmm. When you do that, it's like Stern. You mentioned Howard Stern. When you do that, there'll be an audience that comes to hear it. So he's not predictable. He says things that no one else will say on television. So I think he's doing fine.
Do you, on a personal note, because I suffer a little from this, sometimes I'll meet people, I'll talk to them a little bit, I'll spend some time with them, and they'll go, I thought you were this kind of guy, but it turns out you're a nice guy, or you're not anything like I sort of thought you were, or you're sort of portrayed to be. And I suspect you suffer from that as well. And it's kind of a two-way street, and it can go back and forth. Like we've learned from Ellen recently that she was being portrayed as this, and now she's being portrayed as that. Do you feel like there's a caricature of you that's out there that most of America knows, but they don't, if they really knew more about you or more your interests, or would be surprised to find out X, Y, and Z, that you're, a very dedicated family man or a historian or former history teacher? Like, do you feel that you suffer from that?
Well, I don't even think about it. God's honest truth. I mean, I've known you, 20 years, Carolla?
Yes.
Okay, you know who I am.
Yes.
I mean, you know who I am, right? But people form impressions. I don't even think about them. I wrote a book called A Bold, Fresh Piece of Humanity, which is kind of a bio, a funny bio. My picture on the cover as an altar boy with my hands like this. People want to know about me, they can find out. But what I do is I kind of blithely go along. I put forth my opinion and I write my books. If you like them and me, I'm thrilled. If you don't, I don't care. I'm not in the persuasion business, all right? And I have to say, everybody in the world knows me, Carolla, which is a bad thing. But wherever I go, everybody knows me because 20 plus years in prime time on television will get you that.
Well, and being, I don't know, 6'4" or something like that. I mean, just
I'm 6'4", and but I'm not flamboyant in person. I don't try to draw attention to myself when I'm out in public. But the point I want to make was very few people are nasty to me or come on inappropriate. I wouldn't brook that. And you're right, I'm a big guy, and maybe they don't want to mess with the Irish guy at this point. But I have to say, 90% of my interactions with the public are positive, and they know what I do. They know who I am. I don't do the personal stuff. I don't do the People magazine. I don't do any of that, all right? Because I know I'm never going to get a fair shake from it, ever in a million years. It's not, the press isn't like it was 25 years ago. Now it's harpoon, harpoon, harpoon. That's what they love. Well, I'm not going to play the game.
I want to kind of circle back to something. I think you said you're not in the impression business, like persuasion business. Yes, Apache Comanche. Damn it. All right, so the persuasion business. So I'm interested in this sort of psychological dynamic of things. So Hollywood is in the persuasion business. Everyone in Hollywood, that's kind of their business, the persuasion business. You're not in the persuasion business, and I don't know, neither's Ben Shapiro. They seem to have a certain ire, the Hollywood community, for the folks that aren't into the persuasion/popularity business, because that is their business. They don't say it out loud. I'm just wondering if there's a dynamic here somewhere, which is if they understand they're in the persuasion business mixed with the running for homecoming king, and you're not, is that a dynamic that gets their ire up?
I am not a person who will pander, and you know that better than anybody. So if I see some guy named Monty and he runs CAA, I'm not going over and go, oh, I love what you do. That's never going to happen, all right? So let me give you a good example of your question, and this will answer your question. I did the David Letterman show about 14 times, okay? And Letterman in the beginning despised me. And what he wanted to do, because I never cozied up to Letterman, I didn't say, hey, Dave, I like that tie, or that monologue, the top 10 was the greatest ever. Never would I do that. I'm respectful and polite, but never do that. So he wanted to score points with his liberal crew, because Dave's an avowed liberal. And I was all right with me. I don't mind. So I'm on his show one time. I guess it was maybe the fourth time I was on there and promoting a book. And he says, you know, O'Reilly, 80% of what you say is crap. He said that to me, right?
Right.
On the air.
Right.
And there was a hush in the audience. Because, he was sardonic, but that's pretty in your face, right?
Right. For a guest.
So I looked at him, I said, Dave, can you give me one example of that? Silence. He couldn't. And I said, if you can't give me one example, then how can you calibrate that 80% of what I'm saying is garbage when you can't provide one thing to back that up? Isn't that a little disrespectful to your audience here? That was it. That was it. Okay? From that moment on, Letterman liked me. And in an interview, he said I was one of the best guests he's ever had on his program. And I could see it in his eyes. I bested him, all right? I never pandered to him. But I replied in an honest way. And no one in Hollywood would have done that.
Right.
They would have either fallen apart and, called for their press agent to tell them what to say, or they would have said, oh, Dave, that's right. 80% of what I say is garbage, and I'll be better. I'll be better, Dave. But me, I'm saying, I don't care if David Letterman thinks that 80% of what I say is garbage. I couldn't care less. I just was curious to know how he arrived at that number. Well, and then when I was over, I got a standing O from his audience.
Wow.
That night.
True
story.
I got to hit a piece of business. I'll tease. We should talk a little modern day politics. I know you know Trump well. I'd like to hear your thoughts on chances for second term and what he needs to do and maybe what he doesn't need to do and Biden and so forth. We'll do that in 1 second. Let me hit ZipRecruiter. As an employer, you've got a lot on your plate nowadays, running your business, regulations, ensuring workplace safety, making hiring easy. That's ZipRecruiter. ZipRecruiter.com/Adams, where you go. ZipRecruiter sends your job to over 100 of the web's leading job boards. Plus, ZipRecruiter scans thousands of resumes to find people with the right experience and invites them to apply to your job. Features like screening questions to filter candidates and an all-in-one dashboard to review and rate candidates as well. 4 out of 5 employers who post on ZipRecruiter get a quality candidate within the first day. So if you need somebody or you want to put your resume out there, you go with ZipRecruiter, right, Dawson?
Right now, to try ZipRecruiter for free, our listeners can go to ZipRecruiter.com/Adam. That's ZipRecruiter.com/ADAM. ZipRecruiter.com/Adam. ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire.
So, Bill, with our remaining few minutes, if you could, I've heard you speak pretty eloquently about Trump. I believe I heard you on my friend Dennis Prager's radio program a couple of weeks ago. Very insightful stuff from a person who knows Trump pretty well. What are your impressions? What are your thoughts? I don't know, 40 days out or so.
Well, I can't make any predictions now. I think next Tuesday in the debate, after that, we'll have some clarity. I wrote a book called The United States of Trump. It's a history book on the president. If you really want to understand him, and most people don't, and I understand, but if you really want to know about him and why he does what he does, you read The United States of Trump and you'll know. So at this point, it's a referendum on Donald Trump, the election on November 30th. It's, do we want this guy for 4 more years or do we want him off the stage forever? And the nation is pretty much divided in half on it. All right. So then you have the Biden factor. If there was a charismatic, if Barack Obama had emerged this year rather than in 2008, Obama would have just won against Trump in a landslide.
Right.
If there were some alternative to the chaos that President Trump brings, because he does, he brings chaos. That's not to say he hasn't been successful in his presidency, because he has been. If you just step back, take the emotion out of it, what he did with the economy was very, very impressive. He destroyed ISIS. He's got all of our enemies afraid of him. Now, Putin may be an exception to that, all right? But he did some good things. But if you read the LA Times, the New York Times, Washington Post, he didn't do anything good ever in his whole life.
Yeah, I mean, the moving of the embassy, the Middle East. I mean, that's pretty historic stuff.
Nobel Peace Prize nomination, sure, but he's done some things that have not been constructive for the country, basically because his personality is, I'm not going to take any crap.
Right.
All right. I'm going to tell David Letterman. See, he wouldn't have asked Letterman what I asked. Give me one example. He would have called Dave a name and then made fun of his hair.
Right.
That's what Trump would have done. Right. All right. So he creates this tension.
Right.
Now, Biden is going to come across next Tuesday night as the pacifier. Right. That I'm the experienced hand. I'm going to bring everybody together. And Joe Biden, I look at this barbarian. Let's get the Huns out of Washington and bring in the civilized people led by me. That's what he's trying to sell.
Right.
Trump, on the other hand, is not going to change. He's not going to pander. He's going to say, you're much better off under me, particularly if you're black or Hispanic, because I've got a rip-roaring economy. And once the COVID thing subsides, it's coming back strong. But if you elect those people, we're going to go into a recession. That's your choice. All right. Right. But there is one more factor involved for next Tuesday night when you watch the debate, which will be the most well-watched debate in the history of debates. Can Biden get his ideas across in a manner that makes you think the man is operating at 100%? Because I don't think he's operating at 100%. All right. I think he's down there in the 60s somewhere.
60 percentile. Yeah, in terms of operation, yes, obviously there's something going on beyond just being older than he was. When you see footage of him from 2015, he seems spry, and clear. And obviously there's something neurological going on. The question is how much and how fast?
I wrote a book called Killing Reagan. After Reagan was shot, a few months after he was inaugurated and almost died, his mental acuity collapsed. Public didn't know.
Right.
And this is the fascinating part about the book, Killing Reagan. They kept it from the American people. But some days Reagan could not do his job. Couldn't do it. All right. But other days he was clear. And he made a miraculous comeback from that awful situation. Biden could make the comeback. He could. I'm not a doctor. I don't know. But I follow this, as you know, as closely as any human being in the world follows it. And I don't think at times Joe Biden knows what he's saying. He's disconnected to the words coming out of his mouth. And that's frightening. That is frightening.
I've spoken to Dr. Drew about this on more than one occasion. When you say over 200 million Americans have died of COVID-19, anyone can botch a number, anyone can misspeak, but to power on and not catch yourself, to not have, we all speak for a living, we all know we've mispronounced a person's name or a city or a number, and then you immediately stop and go back and fix it because there's a part of your brain that says, oops, you just said 200 million when you meant 200,000. When you start getting into a neurological part of this, a little dementia or a little something going on, you'll push past that thing you said. It's not really misspeaking. It's not catching it. Your brain will catch it. We do it all the time. The good ones, like Bill O'Reilly, do it very rarely. But him powering forward with miscues is an interesting part that it's not the miscue, it's the pushing past it, not stopping and correcting.
He doesn't hear it.
Right.
He doesn't hear it. Okay. Now, advance the story, which is what I always do. The problem with casting a vote for Joe Biden is that you're going to get somebody running the country, the most powerful man in the world, who at times can't process information. And because of that, is very afraid. Don't you think that Joe Biden isn't afraid? He is. All right. That's why he doesn't do press. That's why he doesn't do rallies. He's afraid. He knows that he's diminished. When you're afraid in a job like the president of the United States, you are susceptible to other people telling you what to do. And I believe that the Biden campaign is being run by Obama acolytes, all right, people like David Axelrod, and that the far left can't wait to get Joe in the office because everything they want, he may not support it, but he's not going to stand up against it because he's confused and frightened. If you see a confused and frightened man on the stage next Tuesday night, you have to vote for Donald Trump as much as you may loathe him. And that is what is going to happen. We'll either see a confused and frightened man, Joe Biden, or a person in command. And we don't know who's going to show up.
Well, my last comment / question is I agree with what you're saying, but if this, in fact, is a referendum on Trump, then by nature, it doesn't much matter who the other person is. I agree, confused and weak and indecisive and all that kind of stuff is not going to be a good look. But if in fact it is really a referendum on Trump, then it's just a referendum on Trump. We'll take a coat rack over Trump.
There is 5 to 8% of Americans at this point are persuadable.
Right.
That will tell the tale.
That's the group.
And with the internet, even if you don't watch the stupid debate, with this, everybody's going to see every mistake. The 5 to 8.
Hold on, a lot of people are listening and not watching. Bill just pointed at his groin. Sorry, go ahead, Bill.
No, I pointed at the stupid machine.
Oh, the phone.
Which is dominating our culture in every simple way. But look, summing up, most important election of my lifetime, I don't want the far left in charge of this country. I've seen what they're doing in New York City. That city's fallen apart under the communist de Blasio, and he is a communist. Portland, Oregon, I live there. That place is going down. Seattle, going down. Minneapolis, a shambles. All far left people governing.
L.A.
I don't want that for the United States.
Yeah, L.A.'s already down. I live here. Bill, the book is called Killing Crazy Horse, The Merciless Indian Wars in America, available now on Amazon. Always an interesting chat, Bill. I hope we can do it again soon.
Anytime. Thanks for having me in, Carolla. I really appreciate it.
And by the way, no spin news as well. Thanks, Bill. We'll talk soon. All right, let me just finish up with Geico here right now. Geico's offering an extra 15% credit on car, motorcycle, and RV policies. That's 15% on top of the money you could be already saving if you were going with Geico. So what are you waiting for? There's never been a better time to switch to Geico. Save an extra 15% when you switch by October 17th. Visit geico.com to learn more. That is geico.com, and a quick 15 seconds for Simply Safe. No one should feel unsafe at home, period, and that's why they're Simply Safe. Peel and stick, up and running in under an hour. Batteries last up to 10 years. 2 eyes, simplysafe.com/Adam. Adam Ray tomorrow. What other show has this kind of range? Bill O'Reilly on to Adam Ray. Look forward to that. I want to thank BetOnline for being a great sponsor, and you can find all the live shows. Salt Lake City coming up, Lafayette, Louisiana coming up. Go to AdamCarolla.com. Till next time, Adam Carolla for Bill O'Reilly and Jeff and Brian and Gina. Yeah, saying mahalo.